Right now, I'm in a place with a warmer climate, taking some time to relax. The past few months have been tough for me. I've been dealing with post-traumatic stress and depression, which has been challenging. I really feel the need to share my thoughts and feelings, but I don't feel comfortable talking to anyone I know. So here goes nothing. Let me give you some background. I'm in my mid to early 30s, and so is my wife. We're both successful professionals. We've been married for over 4 years, and together for more than 5 years. We have a 3-year-old son. Until now, I've always been happy and trusted my wife completely. I've always been supportive of her spending time with her friends. However, this time was different. My wife went on a 3-day girls' cruise with a large group, most of whom were single. Her roommate on the cruise was married and had a little boy, so it seemed like they would be responsible. But as it turns out, the roommate had just found out about her husband's months-long affair. I later learned that she went on the trip to let off some steam and cope with what she had found out. I wouldn't have known all of this if I hadn't checked my wife's phone. As I mentioned before, I trusted her, and we both knew each other's passwords. I had never felt the need to look through her messages. About 2 months after my wife came back from her cruise trip, we attended a party with some of my family and friends. Since my wife's phone took the best pictures, we used it to capture most of the moments. Later, when I got home, my family kept asking for the pictures. My wife was in the kitchen with our 3-year-old, so not wanting to disturb her, I decided to check her phone's photo library to find the pictures. There were so many photos, and to make it easier, I decided to send them through WhatsApp. After sending the photos to my family for some reason, I continued scrolling through my wife's WhatsApp photo library. As I scrolled, a video caught my eye. When I played it, I saw that it was a video recorded by her friend, the same friend she was roommates with on the cruise. In the video, my wife was on the same bed, and she didn't have any clothes on. It was a shocking discovery for me. On the video, I saw her blowing some guy. I couldn't believe my eyes. The shocking scene didn't stop there. After a few minutes of those actions, she stood up and straddled him, riding while her friend recorded and cheered her on. I noticed that both my wife and her friend in the video seemed a bit drunk, but they were still in control of their actions. In the video, I couldn't see her friend since she was the one recording, and the video was only about 4 minutes long. However, I recognized her friend's voice. This left me confused and determined to figure out what was going on. To get answers, I went through my wife's WhatsApp conversations with her friend. It seemed like the video had been deleted from their chat thread. However, because she had already played it, it was still saved on her phone, and she must have forgotten to delete it. I was beyond angry at this point. With rage in my eyes, I rushed to the kitchen where my wife was cooking, carrying our son. I couldn't control my anger, and I ended up grabbing her by the hair, but I quickly let her go when I saw she was about to drop our son. I took my son away from her and pushed her to the floor, demanding answers. It's important to note that I had never laid my hands on my wife before, and just a minute ago I thought I had a faithful wife whom I would trust without a second thought. The next minute I saw her not just blowing another guy, I saw her straddling him. My therapist later said that I may have been experiencing some sort of post-traumatic stress disorder by this point. I showed my wife the video, and she had a terrified look on her face. I threatened her with more violence if she didn't tell me who the man was. She was sobbing and looked really scared, apologizing and saying it was a mistake. She claimed they were both drunk, and she immediately regretted it. But I told her it didn't seem like she regretted anything. Meanwhile, my son was on the floor crying. She got up, rushed to carry him, hoping that I wouldn't hit her if she was holding him. But I continued to follow her, yelling at her to tell me who the guy was and explain what happened. She explained that during the cruise trip, she and her friend got drunk after seeing a show, and then brought one of the male employees from the cruise into their room and slept with him. I couldn't believe she would do this to me. Drunk or not, she violated the trust I had in her. I wanted to tell her to leave the house in the middle of the night, but I felt stuck because I had no one to take care of my son. I was so hurt that I knew if I stayed in the house, I might lose control of my emotions and do something terrible to my wife. In that overwhelming moment, I grabbed my keys and drove away without any specific destination in mind. I ended up stopping in a parking lot to think and calm myself down. After a while, I drove back home, but it was already past 2 a.m. When I returned, my wife was gone, and so was her car. She had taken some of her belongings and left with our son. There was a note she left behind, apologizing and explaining that she left because she was scared of what I might do to her. I couldn't blame her, considering how aggressively I had acted, regardless of whether it was justified or not. I couldn't reach out to her because I still had her phone. In an attempt to have evidence of the video and the chat thread for the impending separation, I forwarded the video to myself, along with the conversation she and her friend were having about the video. That night, I spent alone in my house reflecting on where things went wrong, questioning why I didn't see it coming, and wondering how she could act normal as if nothing had happened. I kept thinking that maybe this had happened multiple times in the past. Finally, I concluded that it wasn't my fault. Those were the last thoughts on my mind until the alarm clock woke me up. Time to go to work. I left her phone on the living room table, hoping she would come back to pick it up. I suspected where she might have gone, but I didn't want to involve more people and make our situation even more embarrassing. I knew I had to leave the house, fearing that if she doesn't return, my son might be at risk. At work, I couldn't concentrate, but I pretended to be okay to hide my anger and frustration. I left home early, and when I returned, my wife was home with my son. By then, I was much calmer, and she kept apologizing to me. It seemed like when I came home, she was planning to leave because she claimed she was terrified of me and hadn't seen me like this before. That's how she realized the extent of the hurt she had caused me. It turned out that she had talked to the friend who recorded the video, and the friend suggested she give me some space. According to her, she was taking her belongings and our son to stay at her friend's house. I didn't say much at that moment. I just told her to do whatever she wanted, as she had been doing so for an unknown period of time. After 2 days of her being gone, I felt ready to talk. I wanted to understand where I had gone wrong. When I asked her, all she could say was that it was the influence of her friend trying to cope with her husband's infidelity, and the alcohol played a part in it. She claimed she would do anything for me to forgive her. She insisted that she had never done something like this before, but I found it hard to believe, given how much trust I had in her. She suggested we go to marriage counseling, but I was skeptical. The image of her with another man was still vivid in my mind, and I doubted if counseling could erase that. A few days later, I allowed her back into the house, but I couldn't stop pressing her to understand why she did it. She kept mentioning how her friend shared stories about her husband carrying on a 2-year affair, and it made her believe that all men cheat. Her friend built up this idea that it was their turn to let loose. Eventually, she admitted that they slept with the same guy 2 more times before she came back home, and she expressed regret for her actions. It turned out that the incident her friend recorded was the second time they were involved with the same guy. Over the next 2 months, I struggled to reconcile for the sake of my young son. However, it proved to be a challenging task. Each day became more difficult than the last. I couldn't eat properly, sleep became elusive, I couldn't go to the gym for my regular workouts, and I found it hard to concentrate at work. Despite her efforts to recount the story and explain herself, I kept wanting to know more, almost like seeking out pain for some reason. Feeling embarrassed to share this among my friends, I eventually decided to see an individual counselor to help me navigate through these difficult emotions. After 5 counseling sessions, the counselor grew concerned about my mental state. He strongly urged me to separate from my wife, even if just temporarily, and take some time to focus on doing things I love. It took me 4 sessions to truly grasp his advice, as he had a way of talking in circles, but his guidance was valuable. When I came home, I explained to my wife that I was filing for separation. She cried and begged, saying she thought things were getting better. However, while she believed things were improving, I was struggling internally. I haven't spoken to a lawyer or initiated the legal process. Instead, I've decided to take some time off work to travel to a warmer climate, where I am at the moment. I'm still trying to clear my mind and assess my mental state, recognizing that I can't live the rest of my life with the haunting image of my wife being intimate with another man. As of now, I'm contemplating filing for divorce when I return to the States, but I'll wait and see how things